There is a moment, usually early, usually subtle, when a person discovers that being helpful earns them a place in the room, a place in someone's life, a place in the world. It's rarely something they consciously choose. It happens slowly, like a quiet bargain formed in the background of their childhood. A trade so gentle they don't even realize they're making it. The trade is this: if I make myself useful, I will not be left behind. Most people experience kindness as an expression. These individuals experience it as insurance, a way to steady the uncertainty of relationships, to soften the fear that their presence alone might not be enough, so they offer help before anyone asks. They anticipate needs before anyone speaks. They step into roles that others naturally leave open, roles of the fixer, the listener, the compensator, the emotional cushion. And because others depend on them, they feel needed. And because they feel needed, they feel safe. But safety built on usefulness always carries a weight that begins long before adulthood. It often starts with one defining experience, a moment when their genuine self was dismissed, ignored, or not fully welcomed. Maybe a parent was emotionally unpredictable, and helping soothed the chaos. Maybe love came only when they performed well, acted responsibly, or stepped into the supportive role. Maybe they watched affection flow more easily when they were doing something rather than simply being. Whatever the moment was, it planted a quiet truth inside them. Value comes from service, not existence. From then on, they began to observe that visibility felt dangerous. When they were noticed, they worried they might be judged, misunderstood, or rejected. But when they were helpful, everyone seemed pleased. So they learned to dim their presence and highlight their usefulness. This is the quiet bargain. I won't ask for too much. I won't take up space. I'll make things easier for you, and in return, you'll keep me close. No one hears these words spoken aloud, not even the person making the bargain, but they live by them, silently, consistently, almost involuntarily, in friendships. They are the one who remembers every detail but rarely shares their own. In relationships, they give endlessly but feel uneasy receiving. In families, they become the mediator, the stable one, the emotional anchor that others lean on. This pattern feels noble on the surface, helpful, kind, selfless, and it is those things. But it is also a shield that protects them from the terror of feeling unworthy when they are not performing. A shield hiding a fear they rarely admit. If I stop being useful, will anyone still want me? Their lives become evidence of this internal contract. People call them reliable. People trust their steadiness. People appreciate them, but often without seeing them. Dependence replaces connection. Predictability replaces intimacy. Efficiency replaces closeness. And the person begins to live in a world where they are always important, but rarely known. Needed, but not noticed. Visible for what they give, invisible for who they are. This chapter is the beginning of understanding that duality, the tender ache behind their constant helping, the quiet longing hidden beneath their calm competence. It is the recognition that their need to be indispensable is not a sign of strength, but a story written long ago, a story of survival, belonging, and fear. A story that now asks to be seen clearly, not judged, not corrected, but gently illuminated. Because only in recognition does the truth begin to unfold, that beneath every act of service is a human being hoping to be valued, not for what they do, but for the person they've always been. Before someone learns to equate being needed with being loved, there is usually a story that came long before the pattern. The story lives in childhood, not always dramatic, not always harsh, but quietly shaping. A story built from experiences that taught them, over time, that affection is something they must earn. For some, the origins lie in a home where emotions were unevenly distributed. A parent who praised helpfulness but overlooked vulnerability. A family environment where being responsible was rewarded, while expressing need was inconvenient. A childhood where caretaking became a natural response to tension, confusion, or unpredictable moods in the adults around them. In these environments, the child becomes perceptive far too quickly. They begin scanning for emotional shifts. They learn what soothes, what stabilizes, what prevents conflict. They become good at anticipating the moods of others because their own sense of safety depends on it. This is not manipulation. It is survival. Emotional survival, wrapped in gentleness, obedience, and early maturity. When a child grows up in a space where their usefulness brings harmony, they begin to internalize the idea that being helpful is the price of acceptance. And if acceptance becomes conditional, so does their sense of worth. Some children experience the more obvious form of conditional love: praise only when they excel, affection only when they comply, warmth only when they perform. But for many, the pattern is much quieter. Not loud enough to be labeled trauma, but consistent enough to become truth. A mother who smiles when the child behaves but withdraws when the child is overwhelmed. A father who commends strength but turns away from tears. A household where sensitivity is too much, but self-sacrifice is celebrated. In these spaces, the child learns that being noticed for their feelings brings disapproval or discomfort, but being needed solving problems, staying out of the way, contributing beyond their age, brings praise. That so they follow the path of least emotional resistance. They reduce the parts of themselves that create tension. They highlight the parts that bring relief to others, and slowly, without ever saying a word, they surrender their identity for the stability of the household. This is how a child becomes a quiet, emotional caretaker. Not because they want to grow up too soon, but because the system around them asks them to. There is also the pattern of parentification, where a child takes on adult responsibilities, emotionally, practically, or both. They become the confidant of a distressed parent, the mediator of arguments, the peacekeeper of a fragile home. They learn to listen more than they speak, soothe more than they express, give more than they receive. To outsiders, they appear mature, considerate, wise beyond their years. But internally, they carry the weight of roles they were never meant to hold. When a child learns that adults depend on them, they begin to believe that their value lies in how well they support others, and that belief stays with them long after childhood ends. Even as adults, they feel drawn to people who need fixing, calming, guiding, nurturing. They gravitate toward roles where their presence is defined by contribution. And relationships that don't require their usefulness can feel strangely empty, even threatening. Because the person fears that without their service they might be dismissed. Underneath this pattern is a deeper truth. They never learned unconditional presence. They learned conditional worth, and conditional worth becomes a lens through which they view every relationship, romantic, familial, or social. They distrust affection that comes too freely. They question praise that isn't tied to effort. They feel uneasy when someone simply enjoys their company, because they don't know what they've done to earn it. This chapter reveals a simple but profound origin. The desire to be needed more than noticed begins in spaces where a child was loved for their function, not their fullness. It begins in rooms where they were seen only when performing, and goes unnoticed in rooms where they were never fully seen at all. To understand why someone grows attached to being indispensable, it helps to look at what happens beneath the surface inside the nervous system, the attachment system, and the psychological architecture that forms from years of practiced self. Because for people who prefer being needed over being noticed, the behavior is not random. It is learned, reinforced, and neurologically comforting in its familiarity. The brain's reward loop of being useful helping others activates the brain's reward centers, particularly the release of oxytocin and dopamine. For most people, these responses are pleasant additions to interpersonal warmth. But for someone who grew up associating usefulness with acceptance, these neurochemical signals feel like safety itself. The body relaxes. The anxiety quiets. Their place in the relationship feels confirmed, and so the brain begins to create a loop. Be helpful gives feel safe. Be indispensable gives feel secure. This loop may not feel like joy, but it feels like relief. And relief is a powerful motivator. Attachment and the fear of being too visible. Many individuals with this pattern carry anxious preoccupied or anxious avoidant attachment traits. Not enough consistent attention to build trust. Not enough safety to express needs freely. Being noticed can feel vulnerable. Being truly seen can feel overwhelming. Visibility means their imperfections might be exposed, their emotions questioned, or their needs dismissed. But when they are needed, the script changes. They are protected by a role. A role is predictable. A role provides structure. A role shields them from the fear that their authentic self may not be welcomed, so they hide behind competence, behind generosity, behind the steady rhythm of showing up before anyone calls their name, identity through contribution over time. The psychological pattern solidifies into an identity. I am the one who helps. I am the one who solves. I am the one who stays strong. It becomes so ingrained that imagining themselves outside of this role feels unsettling. If they are not the reliable one, then who are they? If they are not fixing a problem, what is their purpose in the relationship? This internal identity doesn't grow out of ego. It grows out of an old scarcity, the scarcity of emotional acknowledgement to them. Doing becomes the language of belonging. The cost of invisible labor is any emotional, mental, or practical work that goes unseen. The people with this pattern give endlessly. They anticipate needs before others recognize them. They smooth over social tensions without being asked. They remember details to prevent others from feeling forgotten. They absorb emotional burdens to keep the peace. Most of this work is silent, unacknowledged, unrecorded, yet constantly taken in by the people around them. The tragedy is that their efforts are so seamless that others rarely realize how much energy it takes. The giver becomes the background support systems, stable, reliable, taken for granted in the same way gravity is, but beneath their quiet competence lives exhaustion, a depletion they rarely confess, a fatigue that feels dangerous to reveal, because if they stop carrying everything, they worry the relationship might fall apart. Why stepping out feels frightening. The mind becomes conditioned to believe, if I stop helping, they will stop needing me. If they stop needing me, they will leave. And so invisible labor continues because it feels like the glue holding every relationship together. The psychological irony is profound. The person believes they are preventing abandonment, when in truth, they are abandoning themselves. This chapter reveals the science and internal logic behind the pattern, why the mind clings to usefulness, why the nervous system feels safer in roles than in authenticity, and why invisible labor becomes a quiet addiction. It is not weakness. It is adaptation, a deeply human attempt to secure love in the only way their early world taught them was possible. There comes a point when the role they've mastered begins to feel too small for the person they've become, a point where the constant giving, the constant steadiness, the constant anticipation of others' needs begins to collide with a quiet truth inside them. They, too, long to be seen, not for their reliability, not for their strength, not for their endless capacity to hold space, but for their softness, their fears, their tender, complicated humanity, and yet that desire feels dangerous, almost forbidden. The fear of being too much. People who try to be indispensable often carry a deep fear of taking up emotional space. They worry that their needs will overwhelm others, that their sadness will be inconvenient, that their truth will create discomfort, so they shrink their desires into something manageable. They fold their longing into silence. They only speak when they can be certain it won't burden anyone. This self-suppression becomes so habitual that even simple wishes, a request for help, a moment of comfort, an invitation to be understood, feel like violations of an unspoken rule. Do not need more than others expect you to, and over time, the fear of being too much becomes stronger than the desire to be known. The exhaustion behind the kindness from the outside. They appear endlessly patient, calm, composed. Someone who listens without interrupting, supports without hesitation, gives without limit. But beneath that exterior lies a fatigue that doesn't show. The exhaustion of always being the steady one, the emotional drain of offering presence without being able to receive it. They want to rest, but resting feels like risking connection, because if they slow down or step back, they fear people might realize there is nothing special about them except their usefulness. So they keep going, not because they feel strong, but because stopping feels unsafe. The longing, they rarely admit if someone asked them what they truly wanted. Most wouldn't know how to answer. not because they lack desire, but because they have spent so long prioritizing others that their own wants became blurred shadows. Still, there are moments, quiet, fleeting moments when the truth reveals itself. Moments when they imagine someone noticing their silence, someone recognizing their unspoken weariness, someone choosing them even when they have nothing to offer, someone seeing past the competence and into the person who has been waiting, quietly, to be understood. These desires ache not because they are unrealistic, but because they feel unreachable, the resentment that grows without warning. Even the most patient heart can only stretch so far. Invisible labor, when unreciprocated, turns into invisible resentment. The person doesn't express it directly. They are too accustomed to being agreeable, too afraid of damaging the relationship, too practiced at swallowing discomfort, so the resentment grows quietly, in small size, in emotional numbness, in a sense of distance from the very people they support. A subtle bitterness creeps in, not because they no longer care, but because they feel unseen in the caring. The tragedy is that others often have no idea anything is wrong. They see the kindness but not the cost. They see the strength but not the strain. They enjoy the support without recognizing the sacrifice. The heartbreak of being needed, but unknown to be needed but not noticed, is its own kind of loneliness. It is standing in the center of a relationship while feeling like a supporting character in your own life. It is offering warmth with cold hands, connection with an empty cup. The world knows what they do, but rarely knows who they are. And the most painful part, they fear that if they stopped doing, no one would stay long enough to find out. This chapter exposes the emotional cost of the pattern, the longing that remains unseen, the desires that remain unspoken, and the quiet suffering that comes from giving everything while receiving recognition for almost nothing. It is the point in the story where the heart begins to whisper, "I want to be more than useful. I want to be real." There is always a turning point. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet moment when the person finally realizes the weight they've been carrying is no longer sustainable. It does not arrive as a crisis, though it can. More often, it arrives as a whisper, a feeling, a subtle recognition deep in the body. "I'm tired in a way that helping cannot fix." This is the beginning of collapse, not a failure, but an awakening. When the role stops fitting for years, being needed gave them purpose. Dependability made them feel important. Contribution made them feel secure. But slowly, the role they've lived inside begins to feel constricting, like wearing clothes that once fit but now press against the skin. They notice it in moments when someone asks for help and they hesitate, not out of selfishness, but from fatigue. They feel it when they offer support and no one asks how they are doing in return. They see it clearly when they realize entire relationships rest on their effort while the other person remains emotionally distant. The identity of the reliable one begins to feel like a cage. That the shock of one-sided relationships often comes when they finally look at their connections with clarity. They begin asking quiet questions. Would this person be here if I stopped giving? Do they know anything about my heart, my fears, my needs? Why do I know their history, but they don't know mine? These questions are painful. They reveal how much of the relationship has been held together by invisible labor, their emotional strength, their initiative, their effort. When they compare what they offer to what they receive, they begin to see an imbalance that once felt normal, but now it feels unbearable. The emotional unraveling collapse isn't a single event, it's a process. First comes the weariness, the kind that lingers even after rest. Then the emotional numbness, a sense of going through motions without feeling anything. Then the loneliness, sharper than before, because now they see the truth of their situation. They realize they have surrounded themselves with people who rely on them, but do not really know them. Not the real them, not the person behind the competence and steadiness. This realization is heartbreaking, but it is also necessary. When the body refuses to continue for years, they pushed through every hint of exhaustion. They ignored emotional discomfort. They dismissed their own needs. They convinced themselves they were fine because being needed gave them purpose. But the body always keeps the score. Eventually, The nervous system stops cooperating with the old identity. They feel drained in conversations they used to navigate with ease. They feel anxious at the thought of disappointing someone. They feel resentment even when doing small favors. The body is telling the truth, the mind learned to ignore. The breaking of the illusion collapse often comes with a moment of clarity. Maybe someone they've supported for years fails to notice when they need help. Maybe they experience a moment of vulnerability and the person they trusted withdraws. Maybe they finally say, "I'm tired," and the response is, "Just one more thing." And in that instant, the illusion shatters. The illusion that usefulness guarantees love, that dependability ensures connection, that self-sacrifice earns belonging. They see that people may appreciate their efforts, but still never recognize the person beneath them. This realization hurts deeply, but it is the kind of pain that rearranges a life. The turning point, choosing the self-collapse, is not the end. It is the beginning of choosing differently, choosing rest, choosing boundaries, choosing authenticity, choosing to be noticed, even if it feels risky, choosing to let go of relationships built only on need. It is the moment they understand that being indispensable is not the same as being loved, and being noticed is not the same as being judged. It is the first step toward being known. The collapse marks the turning point in their story. The moment their identity shifts from a role they perform to a self they are finally willing to reclaim. Healing from a lifetime of being needed more than noticed does not happen in a single revelation. It unfolds slowly, like a sunrise warming a room that has been dim for years. Not sudden, not dramatic, just steady, gentle illumination. The return to self is not the act of becoming someone new, it is the act of remembering someone who has been there all along. The unfamiliar quiet of not performing in the beginning. Healing feels strange. There is a profound discomfort in stepping back, in not automatically offering help, in letting silence exist without rushing to fill it. They notice how deeply their reflexes are ingrained. The reflex to soothe, to stabilize, to anticipate, to fix. When they pause these impulses, even briefly, they feel exposed, as if they violated the rule that once ensured their survival. Your worth comes from what you do, not who you are. But slowly, they begin to test the space beyond this rule. They allow themselves to say, "I'm tired." They let messages go unanswered when their energy is gone. They decline responsibilities they once accepted without question. The world doesn't collapse. The relationships that matter begin to adjust. The ones that depended only on their self-erasure begin to fade. This is the first sign that healing is happening. Learning the language of personal need, those who are raised to prioritize others often struggle to identify their own desires. Not because they do not have them, but because they've never been taught to listen inward. Healing begins when they ask themselves small questions. What do I feel right now? What do I want in this moment? What am I afraid to say? What am I longing to receive? These questions are simple, but to someone who has spent a lifetime suppressing their inner world, they are revolutionary. They begin noticing the fatigue they once ignored, the discomfort they used to swallow, the sadness they brushed aside to avoid burdening others. And slowly, needs once muted begin to surface with clarity. The quiet courage of setting boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They are windows that let others see where one person ends and another begins. For someone used to being endlessly available, boundaries feel like an act of rebellion, but they also feel like truth. Healing invites them to say, "I can help, but not at the expense of myself. I care about you, but I also need space. I want to support you, but I cannot hold everything." At first, this feels selfish. Then it begins to feel honest. Then it begins to feel necessary. And eventually, it becomes peaceful. They discover that genuine connection does not crumble when limits are set. In fact, it deepens. Receiving without apology. One of the most profound shifts in healing is learning to receive. Not in exchange for anything, not as repayment, not as proof of usefulness, but simply because they deserve care. The first moments of receiving can feel overwhelming. When someone offers help, warmth, or understanding, they may instinctively refuse. Years of self-reliance make vulnerability feel risky, but with time, they let small acts of care in. Someone listens, someone notices, someone asks questions with genuine interest. Someone holds space for their feelings the way they once held space for everyone else. These moments begin rewriting the internal script. I can be seen without being used. I can be valued without performing. I can rest and still be loved. Reclaiming presences, they return to themselves. Something subtle, yet powerful changes. They stop moving through the world as a function and begin moving as a whole person. Conversations shift. Relationships evolve. Interactions feel more balanced, more mutual, more real. They begin noticing their own preferences, interests, boundaries, and hopes, things that were once overshadowed by the constant pressure to be useful. This return is not loud. It is not heroic. It is steady, human, and deeply personal. Healing is not the end of giving. It is the end of giving at the cost of disappearing. The integration of self and service eventually. They learn a new truth. They can help others and honor themselves. They can give support and ask for it. They can be dependable and visible. Their kindness remains, but it is no longer a survival strategy. It becomes a choice, a real expression of humanity. Rather than a performance for belonging, that the slow return to self is not about becoming less needed. It is about becoming more whole. There comes a point in the journey when the person who once lived behind their usefulness steps into a quieter, more honest way of being. Not fully healed, perhaps. Not perfectly balanced, but clearer, softer, more present. This final chapter is not about transformation in the cinematic sense. It's about integration, the gentle merging of who they were trained to be and who they were always meant to become. Seeing oneself without the old script for most of their life, they looked at themselves through the lens of what they offered. Their value was measured in effort, reliability, sacrifice. Their worth was tied to contribution, but gradually, they begin seeing themselves without that script. They notice qualities that have nothing to do with usefulness. Their humor, their sensitivity, their creativity, their insight, their quiet resilience. These parts of themselves feel unfamiliar, not because they never existed, but because they were overshadowed by the constant demand to be indispensable. The more they recognize their inner world, the more they feel anchored in themselves rather than the reactions of others. Letting connections, breather relationships begin to shift in this new clarity. Some fade away, gently, like a tide receding connections that were built entirely on need rather than mutual presence. There is sadness in this, but also relief. The relationships that remain feel different, more balanced, more mutual, more equal. They begin sharing their inner life in small ways. A truth spoken softly, a feeling admitted, a moment of vulnerability allowed to be seen, and they discover something surprising. The people who truly care don't leave. They lean in. They listen. They notice this is the kind of connection they always longed for but didn't know how to ask for. Becoming someone who is both needed and known as, their sense of self deepens. Their role in relationships also evolves. They are still generous, still attentive, still capable of great empathy, but it no longer feels like a performance or a bargain. Their giving now comes from fullness rather than depletion, from choice rather than fear, from presence rather than obligation. They become someone who is still needed, but not because they sacrifice themselves. They are needed for their perspective, their authenticity, their balanced presence, not for their erasure, and most importantly, they are also known, noticed, recognized, seen in the way they quietly wished for all those years. Making peace with visibility no longer feels frightening. It feels natural, human, a sign of trust rather than a threat. They learn that being noticed doesn't mean being judged. It means being understood. It means letting others see the full spectrum of their emotions, not just the composed, helpful parts. This visibility becomes a kind of freedom, a soft exhale after decades of holding their breath. The gentle redefinition of love in this stage, love takes on a new meaning. Love is no longer something earned by usefulness or maintained by selflessness. Love becomes something rooted in honesty, reciprocity, depth. They allow themselves to want more from their relationships, not in a demanding way, but in a truthful way. They want emotional presence. They want curiosity. They want connection that touches the deeper parts of them they once hid away. And because they now recognize their own worth, they gravitate toward people who reflect that worth back to them. The invitation to live differently, the life ahead, is not perfect. Old reflexes will still whisper. Moments of overgiving may still appear. The urge to disappear into helpfulness may never vanish completely. But there is awareness now, a soft internal voice that says, "You deserve to be here." Even when you are not fixing anything, this awareness becomes a compass, guiding them back to themselves each time they drift too far into old patterns of life seen clearly is not a life without struggle. It is a life where the person finally recognizes their inherent worth. They learn that being needed is comforting, but being seen is transformative. They learn that connection built on authenticity lasts longer than connection built on sacrifice, and they learn, slowly, gently, beautifully, that they were never meant to live as a role. They were meant to live as a person, a whole one, a visible one, a deserving one. In this clarity, the story doesn't end. It simply becomes more true. Here, in this quiet closing, a truth emerges. The world does not just need what they can offer. The world needs who they are.